Hello and welcome back to the Sound Mind Society podcast. I am your host, model, actress, wellness coach, Hailey Kenyon, and I'm so excited to be back for season 2. Today we are talking about feminine and embodied wellness in the context of Mental Health Month. What? Break it down. Okay, May is Mental Health Month, Mental Health Awareness Month, Mental Health Support Month, and I really, for years, have always wanted to do something during Mental Health Month. And I've done a couple things within my community, but this is really important to me to film this episode and just create space for those of you who are dealing with mental health issues, who have faced mental health struggles, and just give you some encouragement, give you a little bit of what I've walked through, give you a few resources that have helped me, and to just create space for you and make you feel seen. I had a pretty severe mental health crisis in 2019 and it rocked my world upside down. It's actually why Sound Mind Society exists, because in a time where I did not feel like I had a sound mind and I didn't know what was going on, God reminded me of the verse 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and sound mind. And I really just anchored on to that verse and it helped me. And then I was like, oh my gosh, if I need this, how many more people in America are going cray cray? And they need this too. And then that was January of 2020. And then COVID happened that year. And so ever since then, I've been like holding on to Sound Mind Society, but I didn't know what it would be. And now as it like evolves and grows and I evolve and I grow, it's a huge passion of mine to bring awareness to mental health issues, specifically around trauma. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not diagnosing anybody, but my story is one that I think is happening more often than not. And so if I can talk about it, give you some resources and share with you how I'm able to be a functioning member of society after everything I went through, then I hope that it brings you comfort. And I am not going to share the whole story with you. It's very heavy, it's very dark. But in 2019, I had a mental health crisis that landed me in a psychiatric hospital for a little over a week. And from there, I was misdiagnosed. I was diagnosed with bipolar type 1 or 2, I can't remember, disorder. And I was put on lithium. I was put on, which is a horribly intense drug, and it will literally like shrivel up your liver. It is so bad for you to be on this drug. It's like one of the first things they prescribed to bipolar patients, like way back when, I think 40s, 50s, 60s. That's when it was really popular. And people hadn't really studied bipolar. We didn't have the language, and it wasn't normal to talk about mental health in the way that it is today. And I'm so grateful that we do talk about mental health in this day and age, and that we do have the information and resources to be able to speak about these things, because back then, I cannot imagine not only having the stigmas, but then the taboo things and the technology and the medicine wasn't up to where it is now. And so it was a really scary time for me. I had left the hospital really thinking I was going to be in and out of psych hospitals my entire life. I have not been back since. I've been completely off medication for years now, for about 3 or 4 years now. But honestly, if I like just went with the system and what was told to me, I probably would still be on medications today and not getting any healing, because my issue wasn't the fact that I have a chemical brain imbalance. It's the fact that I was traumatized chronically for a lot of years, and things just kind of culminated and compounded and never got resolved and healed. And I never really knew anything about emotional healing or spiritual healing. And I was raised Christian, so a lot of it was just like, okay, just pray it away. Or when you see things that are actually symptoms, like abusing alcohol or, sexual promiscuity or gossiping or fear or different things, that is just like spiritual warfare, you not being a good Christian, not that, hey, maybe you're traumatized and we need to actually look at healing. So I kind of had to go on that journey alone, because I knew when I was diagnosed with bipolar, I kind of believed it for a little bit. And then it's one of those things where you get new information and then you're like, oh, maybe I am, because this happened and then this happened and I reacted in this way. It was really scary. And the medications actually weren't working, even though I was on really heavy mood stabilizers, and I gained over 30 pounds because I was on dopamine blockers. I was on dopamine blockers, which is the hormone that makes you feel happy. Like a dopamine hit is like being out in the sun, or people who have addictions, it's like usually a dopamine thing. And so the medication I was on was blocking all of my dopamine receptors in my brain. So I had no dopamine. The only time I ever felt like happy and joyful was when I was eating fast food and sugar. And because I had gone through all of that, I was in you know what, I'm just going to live my life. I'd been a college athlete. I had been an athlete for over 12 years, hardcore athlete. Was always focused on my nutrition, my fitness. And for once in my life, I just let myself live. If I wanted to go to In-N-Out and eat a bunch of food, then I was going to go to In-N-Out and eat a bunch of food and eat a bunch of ice cream and all this stuff. And it was the only time that my brain actually got like a hit of something. I was eating pastries like crazy at work. If they were like day over pastries or brownie bites that were if like cut off of the brownies, I would eat those too. And so it really was just like a wild time. And so I gained like 35 pounds. I'm 6'1" though, so a lot of people couldn't really tell, but I could tell. My pant size definitely went up quite a few. And it was so many things all at once to deal with. There was a breakup that it was connected to. There was previous relational trauma. There was sexual abuse in my past. There was so many different things that linked to this. I had 2 knee surgeries and a back injury in the course of a couple years, and volleyball had been my entire identity, and I had never seen myself as someone who was going to sit the bench. Like, I was always like a first string player in whatever I did. So to have those kinds of difficulties and not have the emotional tools to deal with them, and then on top of that, when I was in high school, I had teachers literally tell me that my ACL got torn because God was punishing me because I was putting volleyball above God, and like just wild stuff. I'm like, oh, I just want to give my teenage self a hug because she had no freaking idea. Dealing with drama at school and girls and mean girls and things like that, and with no outlet, with no way to channel that. And I just always felt trapped. I felt trapped. Like I was never living the life that I was meant to live, that I was like someone else in my body than I was to the rest of the world. And that was just a really hard feeling. And then you mix God in that, and it was just a lot for my little brain without even having a frontal lobe to process. And so then you throw in getting hospitalized and then hearing diagnosis with something like bipolar, and it's like, okay, you're definitely crazy. And so I just knew I had to fight it though. I knew I had to learn all I could. And one day I was actually on staff at a church, and I was having symptoms flare up, even though I was taking the medications. And that's when I was just like, okay, what is good? I felt crazy. I felt crazy. But if you knew more of the story, it would make complete sense. It's because I was being triggered 24/7 at my job because of certain things that had happened prior to me being in the hospital. And there was a wonderful, amazing counselor who was there, and he was very trauma informed. He's done a lot of work with police officers and first responders. And I was in the lobby one day, and I remember just like telling him, like, well, like with my bipolar disorder and all this stuff. And like, I didn't want to, I just knew, I like had this feeling. I think it was the Holy Spirit in me just being like, keep fighting, keep going. There's something else in here. There's another nugget for you to get. Even when that was like what was circulating around, that was like the rumor, like, okay, Hailey has bipolar. So when she freaks out, blah, blah, all this stuff. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I wish I could give that version of myself a big fat hug too. And I have in my mind a lot. Um, and this counselor, he hands me this book, and he's like, you don't have bipolar disorder. You've been traumatized. Read this book. And then at that time, I was getting a new therapist as well, because part of what landed me in the hospital is I didn't have proper care given to me by a therapist from the get-go. And things are, when you're talking about relational abuse and sexual abuse and college party phase and religious trauma and all of these things, like there's just, oh my gosh, there's so much intentional care that needs to happen, and there's so much safety that needs to be established, because I don't think I'd ever felt true, proper safety in my body. And I sure as hell didn't know how to give that to myself. All of these things happened that just really ended up with me being in the hospital. And this guy was like the first glimmer of light, like someone affirming that I wasn't crazy. And then it makes you feel even more crazy when you're the only one who doesn't believe you're crazy. And thankfully, I have a really supportive family, and my mom was always there to just like listen. And I just talked out everything with her, everything I saw in the hospital. Like, that was also freaking traumatizing. Like, I could write a book for sure on just the people I met in that place. It's probably against HIPAA codes, but I don't know, maybe I'll change their names. And so he hands me this book. It's called Restoring the Shattered Self. It's about complex PTSD, and it has a Christian background. So I dive into this book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me. Because the reason why so many people with PTSD and complex PTSD get misdiagnosed as bipolar is because it has a very similar mood curve to it. So bipolar is very much, you have really high highs, you have really low lows, and it's constantly just on a wave of, high, low, high, low, high, low. And the higher the highs, the lower the lows, because you crash out. Usually with bipolar, it's not something that can be controlled. You can be totally fine. You can be in a stable state, and then your brain chemistry gets off, and there's contributing factors, of course. But then you're just riding this high and you don't sleep for weeks and days and you think you could do anything and you're manic and you're very grandiose. And I read a book called The Unquiet Mind of a woman who was bipolar. And when she felt herself getting into those states, she would not sleep for weeks on end. And she actually would not take her medications on purpose so she could do things like write her thesis papers for college. Like it is like that kind of like brilliantly insane. There's a lot of our actors and artists have came out with the fact that they are bipolar. I do also know though that bipolar gets misdiagnosed all the time. And mind you, like this whole time I'm going through this was years. This was probably a good solid 4+ years until I really was like, okay, no, this is what happened to me. And I was able to move past it because the whole time out of the hospital, I'm asking my psychiatrist for neurotransmitter tests because I'm like, well, let's look at what's going on in my brain. You guys say I'm freaking crazy. Let's look at what's going on in my brain. Neurotransmitter tests, brain scans. I was like, maybe I have a brain tumor. None of that. ADHD tests. No, it was like, you're bipolar, stay on these meds. If you come off them, you're going to have that kind of thing. But I was still getting triggered on the meds because it wasn't a chemical issue. It was a trauma, somatic issue, compounded over time. And then you add this specific experience of being in the hospital, just skyrocketed it through the roof. And then I'm in environments that are highly spiritual and they're not trauma informed. And so to really be at a church where there was somebody trauma informed that could hand me this book and give it to me, I realized that those curves for me always were tied to a trigger. So at that time, I'm reading this book and then I start going to a therapist who is trauma informed, my first very trauma informed therapist. And I'm not talking about someone who can just do EMDR. I'm talking about trauma informed. She taught me about triggers and she had me go home and write down all my triggers. I must have written down 100 things that trigger me, just that were going on in my day-to-day life. And so once I learned what a trigger is and I was able to dissect that and kind of work backwards from there, then I could start to heal those triggers. At the same time, mind you, I'm 35 pounds heavier. So I was like, I'm 6'1". I think I was like over 185 pounds. I'm normally like 155, 160, 150-ish. I think I was 150 before I went into the hospital. I gained 35 pounds. So I'm also being told like, okay, you have to, like, you don't have any wiggle room. You have to exercise. You have to diet to keep yourself from not going crazy. It's like, those were the stakes that if you want to go crazy and live in a mental hospital the rest of your life, in and out, and live with your parents, this is what you have to do. But I just remember I remember very specifically being in my room, 35 pounds overweight, not knowing if I'm going to be labeled crazy for the rest of my life, not knowing if I'm just going to be treated like a member of the Champions Club at the church. I decided in that moment, like I knew, and at this time I could literally cry right now thinking about it because of the sound mind verse I had been given as an anchor pretty shortly after the hospital. And I knew I wanted to help people as soon as this happened because I was like, I didn't go through all of this to not help people, to not make a difference. So as soon as I got out of the hospital in like September, October, that January, I jump into psych classes at my community college and I'm taking abnormal psych. Okay. Try taking abnormal psych when you've just gone through some of the craziest shit anyone has ever seen in a hospital. And then you are taking a class and I'm literally sitting in class like, maybe I am fucking crazy. Maybe I am. What I want to get to though is that I knew this happened to me for a reason. I knew the whole time that like Jesus was with me. And even after coming out of the hospital is one of those things where you're just like, God, where were you? Like literally you let people think I was crazy. You let me stay in that hospital for a week. You let me see some certifiably insane things, some in one of the worst mental health hospitals in California that was like low key, like a cross between a prison and a hospital. Awful. It was horrible. And I just knew Jesus was with me. Like I could literally like moments when I was in that hospital and I'm like sitting on the edge of the bed, like praying, like stealing the Bibles from the day room to just like connect with God. And like then later having the revelation that like Jesus was literally like with me, sitting in the middle of that with me, knowing the answer, knowing my heart, giving me a sound mind through all of that. I was like, okay, if you can love me and you died for me and you love me no matter what, then I can love me too. And that starts with my body. And that starts with being 35 pounds overweight and saying, I'm going to choose to be confident and love my body because you made me beautiful no matter what the number on the scale says. You made me tall. You made me to stand out. You didn't make me to fit in. So you must have a purpose in this, and I will respect the body that you gave me. And I didn't focus on trying to lose the weight and trying to stick to a regimented program. I played a lot of volleyball. I ate a lot of in and out with my brother, and really over time, like it took a couple of years, but I got back down to where I am now, and to now be in a place where I'm going to be teaching Pilates. And Pilates is something that changed my life because it gave space for my body to process emotions and trauma in a supported way that no other form of exercise I had ever done had done before. And I'd taken a little bit of Pilates classes before that, but the specific studio that I'm now getting certified through, the owner, Lexi, she just has such a rich understanding of the body, of the nervous system, of a holistic approach, and really just being able to be seen in that. Like she met me after my engagement broke off. So it was, years of compounded stuff, engagement, moving, finding out you're engaged to a con artist, going through all of this stuff. And there was a lot of deep trauma in that relationship and just a lot of safety things too that I didn't know if I was going to make it out alive. And so I will always think of that moment as like my wellness thing, because for years I had battled my body with injuries too. There's nothing worse than being an injured athlete when you are so used to being able to go and push your body to new limits, and you can, and you have the capability, but you have an injury like a torn ACL or surgery you're recovering from, or a back that goes out. And so for me, I'd spent so many years at odds with my body, frustrated. Why don't I look this way? Why can't I jump past this point of, being in surgery? Why am I so exhausted? And it was just so much that I had carried for so long. And it was like, knowing that God carried me through all of that, and then being at that point where it was like, okay, I'm going to love my body. I'm going to love it. I'm still going to wear a swimsuit. I'm not going to hide my body. I did hide it a little bit with a lot of oversized t-shirts for a few years. But it was a way that I could feel confident and comfortable in my body. I was doing the baggy thing before Gen Z even hopped on that. I started to fall in love with caring for my body, taking care of my body. And then when I started understanding trauma and the nervous system, and I had that Pilates element included where it's like your body's just shaking past the point of fatigue and neurons are firing and you're able to get trauma out of your hips. And I'm crying in massages and I'm crying in yoga classes, and the things that I think the church often is like, oh, what are you going to do? Take more yoga? Like, yes, I am going to take more yoga, and I'm going to spend this time in my body, with my body, not judging my body. And I'm going to go on the boating trip and on the Tahoe trip and on the hikes. And I really just started hiking a lot during COVID I don't hike anymore because your girl's freaking afraid of snakes, but I hiked a lot that summer, just walking with friends. And that's a lot of what we would do for social stuff. And so it changed my life and made me rethink the way that I think about fitness. And even before all that, I had been really passionate about fitness. I was on Instagram as Healthful Hailey. I was studying to be a dietitian. I was constantly posting recipes, taking food photos, and all of that. But even in that, I didn't feel satisfied, and I knew there was more of an embodied whole way. And then I was like, for a time in my life, I was like, well, forget the food. I'm just going to talk about Jesus because he's the bread of life, right? That only got me so far too, because then when I was having real physical, somatic, mental issues because of unresolved trauma and because of spiritually being bypassed so many times in my life and being spiritually abused by people in leadership, like crazy stuff, you guys. I was just like, no more. There's something more here. And like the way that when I actually care for my body and I actually show up in my body and I show up as who God made me, and then I support my body and I take care of myself out of that, then that is worth more than anything than I could do as just being a youth director or just being the nutrition girl. And so now, because I'm more comfortable and I've been able to create a safer container for myself in my life, I am now able to be in a place to speak about this pain and to speak about what I went through and bring light to people, because I'm so passionate about creating a trauma-informed community and a wellness community that regulates your nervous system and realigns you in your spirit with who you are on an authentic, deep level. And what I think makes my journey so unique now is going through all of that and then stepping into modeling, into acting, into more full-time entertainment content creation roles, is that I'm still who God intended me to be, but I have all of this experience to draw from and that I've learned from it to now help people out of. And so if you have ever felt trapped by your mental health, your physical health, all of that, I just want to say there's a way out for you to just keep seeking answers. There was one quote when I was going through a lot of this. I think this was actually in Elisa Turker's book. I could be totally wrong, but the quote was from her counselor, Jim, I want to say, not Jim Crow. I can't remember his name, but the quote was that mental health is the relentless pursuit of reality, which is wild, right? Mental health is the relentless pursuit of reality. And I think a lot of times, like what bipolar disorder is, or what a lot of things end up being, is like being out of touch with reality. And I just found, like, looking back at everything, that the church was a space that caused me to be very out of touch with reality. So I had to answer the question, how do I live out a life of faith and be in touch with reality? And a lot of that was just I could be in touch with my reality, the way that I feel about things, the way I think about things, getting down to fact and truth and all of that, because even in my engagement, hello, out of touch with reality. It was just such a whirlwind. And when it got down to like the logistics of things, my ex-fiance really well, we don't need to worry about that because God's going to provide, and all of this stuff that I think is just so used and abused in the church. That's also why I want to talk about everything in the church, because it's what a vulnerable place for people who have trauma, who are not receiving trauma-informed pastoral care, who are taught to live in almost a delusional spiritual state, in my opinion, and to not really get down to reality. So what you end up doing is you end up spiritually stunting people, emotionally stunting people, mentally stunting people. Then you shame things like yoga and working out a lot and fitness. And then there's donuts at every church event. I'm like, how are we setting people up to succeed in this environment? And I don't hate the church. I love the church. And I enjoy being a part of the church. I can't change all of the churches in America. I never will. I don't want to. But if I can just share my story and my experience, maybe you can feel like, oh, I'm not crazy. And yeah, that is true and that is happening. And then you can use your influence and your discernment to just create a different environment. Like maybe if you're in charge of the snacks for something, maybe let's not do donuts every single time at church. That's just my opinion. Dr. Amen would also back me up on that. But this is really serious. We are in a time where people have more trauma than ever. We've all gone through COVID, so we've all been traumatized on some level from that. The rates of medical trauma and spiritual trauma and relational trauma and domestic violence trauma and financial trauma are just rising through the roof. And if we never learn how to regulate ourselves, how to heal ourselves, how to advocate for ourselves, we are not going to see the changes that we want to see in this world. And I believe that every single one of us, and you and my people that are drawn here, you are all capable of creating so much change in your community. And a lot of it requires facing your own demons first. And that's a lot of what I had to do. But I want you to know that just when you accept reality, you choose to love yourself through it, and you find the right support and resources for you, you will heal 100% and you will be more than you ever imagined. And so during this mental health month, more than just dropping the stigmas, I really hope that you can just see that mental health is your whole life. And what's stigmatized is when it just becomes a mental health issue, right? Oh, she just has mental issues, blah, blah, blah. No, she's probably traumatized. She probably has an inflamed body as well. She might not work out or move her body in a way that's supportive to her. And this leads to all kinds of things. We're talking eating disorders. We're talking staying in toxic romantic relationships. We're talking choosing a career field that, makes you mentally not okay. Like there's so much more to this. And I hope that not just in this month or this podcast episode, but through every episode, that you guys understand that It is so important to be trauma informed. It's so important to know how your nervous system works, and you're not denying God when you choose to go on that journey of supporting yourself and caring for yourself and setting boundaries and understanding what your values and your gifts are and really building a life around that. Rooted in being grounded and in reality. And I think there is this beautiful tension. I think I've even been able to find it, and it's not perfect every day, but you can have a blend of being so grounded in reality and what is in facts, and have huge faith to believe in things that are like, when they come to pass, it's going to be an only God thing. It is going to be an only God thing. And just looking at my life and being transparent with you guys, like, I've been through hell in my relationships. All of my relationships have been garbage cans. Like, they've just, I've not had like, I've had one, like, I've had a couple like not horrible relationships, but I've had a lot of just the kinds of guys I've dated and things like that just not being good. And so that is one of the areas of my life where I'm like, it has to be God. Like, when my man comes, and I'm not going to settle. Like, it has to be God. And so there are other things too, even Sound Mind Society, all this stuff, the dreams that I have, like, it has to be God. And I will do my part of showing up for myself, my body, continuing to chase my dreams, stay grounded in reality, and also learn to accept and see and trust that the divine things are coming too. And so I hope that this conversation has opened your mind. Thank you for listening to all of my huge trauma dump and coming on this journey of an episode with me. If this is a topic you want to talk about and you want to hear about, it's a topic I want to talk about. So please feel free to send if this sparks anything about resources or people or organizations, whether you're in Solano County or beyond, or the Bay Area or California or wherever. I would love, love, love to keep having these conversations and just spread the word and the awareness out there. And that's why I'm doing things like the Triggers and Glimmers workshop, where we are going to look at your glimmers, how to kind of rewire some of your triggers, get you the support you need, and help you feel what it feels like to feel grounded in your body. And no, here's the thing, when we talk about reality and faith and being out of touch with reality, that like good feeling, that grounded feeling we get like at the end of a yoga class or like in a really good worship service, um, I think that's actually the posture we're supposed to be living out of more than when we live out of cortisol and stress and all of this stuff. And oh, that reminds me of something. I don't think I finished this thought in the episode, but those up and downs I was talking about that are present in bipolar disorder are present in complex trauma, PTSD, specifically complex trauma, because you have a trigger. It sends you into this hypervigilant state. There's cortisol, there's adrenaline. And then when those things tap out, when those hormones kind of go away, then you crash, then you're depressed, then your body's exhausted. And the thing with complex PTSD and with PTSD is the reaction you have to a trigger is not always proportionate to the actual danger. The perceived threat is stronger than the actual threat. That's why, you might have experienced something traumatic and just the smell of a certain room can trigger you. You're safe, you're fine. That's why finding safety is so important. And actually, the first part of you being treated by a professional should always, always, always be rooted in a lot of safety and a lot of creating a safe space. And if it's not, that might be a red flag that you need to find a different therapist or a more trauma-informed therapist, someone who also understands attachment theory and is willing, like, your therapy should be like a few sessions of you just laying out everything, especially if you've been through a lot of trauma, and your therapist really understanding that and creating safe rapport with you and giving you tools to feel safe in your own body. And if you haven't learned how to do that, what I teach in the Sound Mind Reset is a lot of learning how to feel safe in your own body. And in order to do that, a lot of times we have to rewire negative beliefs, a lot of which we've picked up in the church, a lot of where we've outsourced our authority, and kind of come back to what brings us to being grounded and healed and whole. And in that grounded state, like, Jesus is living, if you're a believer, Jesus is living in you. So it's never about going to get something and striving for God. It's always about returning here, right? It's always about that gut feeling that is so often the Holy Spirit. It is about that inner knowing that is often God leading you, the still small voice, the whisper. You can't hear that when your nervous system is like freaked out all over the place. And there's just like years of trauma building up. We know trauma lives in the body, referencing the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So all of that is very, very, very real. And if you don't have the safety established to help you work through those things and self-regulate, just don't think you're going to live the fullness of the life that God has for you. And I do think there are more churches out there than not, significantly more, not doing us a favor in the way that they teach and talk about things like trauma, mental health, um, physical health, everything like that. So that is my stance and my take on mental health, and it is very fluid as well. You need to know what is supportive for you in any given moment and to not feel like you have to fit into any kind of box, or whether that's a diagnosis, a religion, whatever. Like, you are the one living your life. You're the one who knows how you feel. You're the one who knows how you think. And I think we can really repair that relationship with self, to not judge and to know that, like, God sees you. He loves you. Jesus sees you. He loves you. Just like Jesus was with me in that hospital, and he revealed himself to be right by my side the entire time. And he's the reason I got through that time. He is with you. He sees you. He is not afraid of the thoughts in your head. You guys, mental health is not just about the thoughts that go through your head. If every single person had to share every single one of the 60,000 thoughts that went through their head every single day, we'd all be locked up. Okay? We'd all be locked up and cut off from this world, because you are going to have intrusive thoughts. You are going to have wild, outlandish anxiety thoughts. You're going to have hateful thoughts. And it's not necessarily about stopping those thoughts and being like, okay, well, I can't think that ever again. Because if the more you think about it, think about not think. It's like if I told you, think about anything but a big fat white elephant in the middle of your room right now. Don't think about the white elephant. Stop thinking about the white elephant. You're thinking of a white elephant in your room right now. But instead, what can I replace those thoughts with? So then forming a new neural pathway, and that becomes the reality from which I live. And just what I've seen in the mental health system, when you talk about misdiagnoses and over medication and improper medication and not moving your body, and then shaming everything under the sun in the church. I don't think there are churches out there, I will say this, like, that churches are intending to do this. I just see over and over again, this is the result of what they're doing. So if that's the continual fruit, we kind of have to backtrack and think about what's going on to make that happen. And it's not just that people are bitter and rude and offensive and shut off to the Holy Spirit. There's something bigger going on. So anyway, stick with me as I continue to uncover all of this and to talk about these things and to provide resources for you, because I really just want you this month, in Mental Health Month, and every other month and year of your life, to just not think you're going crazy all the time. You have one life to live. You have your specific set of dreams and gifts and skills that we need on this earth that you can bless people with. And I hope that listening to this and listening to my story encourages you to just love yourself where you're at. Decide right now that you're going to love yourself where you're at. Rely on the help of God and the guidance of Jesus to get you through whatever it is you're going through, and know that you're going to be okay. You just got to keep going. You just got to keep showing up, and you don't have to show up perfect. You can show up a mess. And you don't have to fix every area of your life to bring good things into your life. And we don't have to play into this imposter syndrome and the anxiety and the depression and all of these things. And a lot of it is probably your nervous system is just jacked up, because we live in a culture and we live in a society that really just jacks up our nervous systems and then doesn't really ever bring us back down to regulation or teaches us how to do it. So many things I could rabbit trail into here, but I want to wrap this up. And so thank you so much for listening. Also, if you do need support, if you do need help, I want to tell you about NAMI, which is the National Alliance Against Mental Illness. And they have tons of resources, nami.org. You can go on their website. Also, just reach out if you have questions. I do have a mental health coach certification, so I am certified to help people walk through treatment and mental health things. Cannot diagnose, but I can inform you and let you know what different things, like a therapist or psychotherapist, or help you if you're on that journey of getting more help, plugging you in with what might be good for your body and your situation. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, you guys. I am so grateful that you're here, and I will talk to you very soon in the next episode of Sound Mind Society.